There's a hidden reason why your team doesn't trust you, and no one's telling you what it is until now. Today, we undertake a psychologist's deep dive into the leadership empathy deficit, where we'll unmask how specific blind spots, such as difficulty seeing others' viewpoints, appearing emotionally detached, dismissing feelings, or missing crucial non-verbal cues, and how they stem from complex psychological roots and create an invisible yet formidable wall between you and your team. Understanding this is foundational to dismantling those barriers and fostering genuine connection and peak performance. So let's get into it. We're going to kickstart things tackling leadership disconnection. Empathy in leadership operates on two vital channels: the cognitive, which is understanding another person's perspective, and the affective, which is resonating or sharing their emotional experience. So when one or both are deficient, the leader may appear cold, detached, or simply unable to grasp what their team is going through. And with that, I want you to consider Howard Schultz during Starbucks' 2008 crisis. Instead of doubling down on performance metrics, he famously visited stores personally, reconnecting with staff to understand their frustrations and their experiences. That return to empathy wasn't a PR stunt. It was the foundation for revitalizing a culture that had grown transactional and disjointed. Another symptom of being low on these two forms of empathy is that leaders might consistently fail to recognize non-verbal cues of distress, such as the subtle signs of burnout, anxiety, or disengagement written on their team's faces or in their posture. And its roots: overthinking as self-defense, narcissistic drift, emotional numbness from burnout, all of them silently walling you from your team. And the impact on the team is profound. They feel invisible, invalidated, like mere cogs. Their motivation wanes when their inner experiences are consistently missed or misunderstood. History offers grim portrayals of leaders, famed perhaps for strategic brilliance or iron will, yet utterly detached from the human costs of their decisions. Their inability to connect with the experiences of their people often sowed deep resentment and ultimately contributed to their own isolation or the fracturing of what they sought to control. So, what ends up happening is the leader operating with an empathy deficit functions within an echo chamber of their own perspective, starved of the crucial human data that informs wise decisions and fosters loyalty, which means they are in essence leading blind to the true landscape of their team's reality. This inability to see or feel another's world often leads to another corrosive pattern: the outright dismissal of what team members explicitly try to communicate. And this brings us on to leadership invalidation. Consider the leader who, when faced with a team member's expressed emotion or concern, responds by dismissing or invalidating it with things like, "You're being too sensitive, that's not a big deal," or "just get over it." Or perhaps they resort to stereotyping or generalizing, making broad assumptions about individuals based on group affiliation rather than seeking to understand their unique experience. This invalidating stance can stem from the leader's own discomfort with emotions, rigid belief systems, cognitive biases that filter out contrary information, or even an unconscious attempt to maintain control by defining reality for others. The consequence for the team is a swift erosion of psychological safety. Individuals learn that sharing their true feelings or diverse perspectives is unwelcome, even risky, so they shut down. Resentment simmers. Trust is fractured, often irreparably, as the very act of dismissing another's reality is a profound rejection. It's like speaking into a void, only to hear your voice swallowed by silence. Over time, people stop speaking altogether. This is where communication doesn't just break down, it's actively demolished. And if you're witnessing these communication voids where your team feels unheard or invalidated, it's critical to find ways to reopen those channels. So in the description below, you'll find a link to a webinar that I host focused on providing practical tools to foster respectful dialogue and rebuild that essential foundation of trust. Because you see, dismissing another's emotional reality or resorting to stereotypes is not a sign of strong, decisive leadership. It is a failure of curiosity and respect, which is essentially an abdication of the leader's duty to understand the varied human experiences that constitute their team, thereby starving the organization of diverse insights and untapped potential. These empathy deficits aren't isolated incidents. They weave together to create a deeply problematic leadership tapestry. And this brings us on to the last point: fractured foundations. The cumulative impact of these empathy deficits is severe. Morale plummets when individuals feel unseen and unheard. Engagement withers because discretionary effort is rarely offered to a leader perceived as uncaring or unfair. Loyalty frays. Collaboration becomes transactional at best, as team members guard themselves against further invalidation or misunderstanding. Innovation is stifled because psychological safety, which is the bedrock of creative risk-taking, is absent. Ultimately, the leader's own effectiveness is fundamentally compromised. How can one truly motivate if they cannot connect with what drives their people? How can one inspire loyalty without demonstrating genuine care and understanding? How can one build resilient teams if they are blind to the cracks forming within individuals? Some of the most well-documented organizational failures, looking back, reveal leadership cultures that prioritized ruthless, detached efficiency over human connection, eventually struggling with innovation, employee retention, or public trust. Uber's early leadership under Travis Kalanick, for instance, became infamous for its aggressive, emotionally indifferent culture. Despite explosive growth, internal toxicity led to mass resignations, public backlash, and eventually Kalanick's ousting, which are all symptoms of unchecked empathy deficits at the top. You see, an empathy deficit in leadership is not a minor flaw, it's a fundamental crack in the foundation. It ensures the leader is always working with incomplete information, making decisions based on a partial, often distorted understanding of their most critical resource, their people. But with all that said, is empathy a fixed trait, or can it be cultivated? Well, while some individuals may have a more natural inclination towards empathy, it is indeed a capacity that can be consciously developed and strengthened, but it does require intentional effort. The journey begins with active listening, which is truly hearing not just the words, but the underlying meaning and emotion. It involves practicing perspective taking, which is consciously trying to step into another person's shoes so you can see the world from their vantage point. It demands seeking out diverse inputs, challenging one's own biases and assumptions, and engaging in self-reflection about how one's own actions and words impacts others. Crucially, emphatic leadership isn't about necessarily agreeing with every viewpoint or emotion, nor is it about becoming overly sentimental. It's about the consistent, disciplined effort to understand others deeply and authentically, and to allow that understanding to inform a more compassionate and effective leadership approach. Because ultimately, empathy is not a soft skill, it's your strategic edge. And without it, you lead in the dark, build on fractured ground, and ask for loyalty you haven't earned. Cultivate it from today, and you'll stop managing people and start moving them. But look, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Peace.